David, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great.
Hello everyone.
And then we're waiting for Daniel as well. There should be one other person that needs to be.
I'm here just turning my.
Oh, okay. I couldn't see you, Daniel. Oh, you just don't, you're not on screen. Okay. All right. Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us today. We are hoping to have a casual but thorough conversation amongst generations. And so we're each going to introduce ourselves. And I just want to give a particular shout out to Daniel. Daniel, what ridiculous hour in the morning is it in Peru?
5 now.
Okay. So, well, we might forgive Daniel if he if he starts to yawn because he's up very early in the morning. So I am Maureen Gallagher. I am the global ambassador for the European Federation of Geologists. And it's our organization that put this presentation together today. Um, just I just want to quickly make sure everybody can hear us through the headphones. Okay, we're doing good. Okay. Always good to do extra sound checks just in case. Um, and so we want to have a multi-generational discussion, particularly about, how some of the challenges that we think that we face not only in the Arctic, they might be amplified in the Arctic, but I think you're going to hear that these challenges resound across generations, across disciplines, and all around the globe. So again, I am the global ambassador for EFG. That is my voluntary position. I am an ecologist by training and 35 years of a career in the United States as an ecologist. But geology is so important, and geology and ecology are so inexplicably linked that this is what I spend my time doing on vacation. So with that, I represent the late career individual on the panel, and I'm going to pass it to one of our early career, and then we'll go to the gentleman on Zoom.
Thanks, Maureen. Welcome, everyone. I'm Bianca. I am a political scientist. I have a background in politics and economics, but I also focus on critical minerals, which is why there is a relationship to the European Federation of Geologists. I am the young career person on this panel. I always jokingly say that I've been working in the minerals industry for plus 10 years because my first job was in a minerals company, mining company, when I was 15 years old. So it's always been around. It's always been a topic in my life, but I'm still very early career when it comes to this topic, when it comes to real geology and geoscience.
David, do you want to take us next and introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is David Govoni. I'm from Italy. I'm a geologist as background. I'm president of European Federation of Geologists, and also I'm in charge of mining, geology, and sustainability for an Italian company in mining industry. And I represent mid-career here. I have about 20 years of experience.
And Daniel.
Well, hello everyone. I'm Daniel Caceres. I am a marine biologist, and I am a millennial because I was born in 1994. So I do a lot of mostly of ocean conservation and trying to limit our species. I think that's one of the things that characterizes millennials, and we try to understand our species more than others in the role with our planet.
Great, thank you. So I have some questions that I was going to ask my fellow panelists, but at any time, if any of you have a question or you would like to interject, if you would like to join the conversation, we would love to pass the microphone around and hear your perspectives. I wanted to ask everyone to start with just give us a picture of when you think of the Arctic and you think of the need to get critical raw materials out of the ground. What do you imagine? You want to start, Bianca?
Okay. Just to give some background on what I'm doing, I think that will be helpful for my thoughts on that. I'm the chair of the Resource Management Young Member Group, and we are part of the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. And UNECE, especially the expert group on resource management, I'm going to refer to it as EGRM from now on, focuses on a standard that is supposed to improve decision making in all, not only in critical minerals management, but also petroleum projects, anthropogenic resources, and different resource projects. And that's particularly relevant because the European Union is scaling up critical minerals, is scaling up mining, which hasn't been done in decades. It's always played a role in Europe, but the past decades, mining activities went down. And now mining activities are probably going to go up again. And that's related to a lot of risks, I'd say. Everyone who's here, you might have heard of headlines of mining companies causing social injustices, environmental damage. And the mining industry has an image problem, and that image problem exists for a reason, which doesn't mean mining should be banned completely, but it should be improved. It should be done better. And I feel like in Europe, we're now scaling it up again. And that is also a great opportunity to do it better than it was done in the past. So when I think about the Arctic, when I think about mining in the Arctic, the first thing that comes to my mind are the indigenous communities, the Sami people, for example, who are disproportionately impacted by mining risks, by environmental damage. And in the past, they've also been stripped of many rights to their lands. So that's the first thing that comes to my mind. And that's also one of the things that I think we need to do better. And that our group, which is the Resource Management Young Members Group, is also focusing on avoiding in the future.
David or Daniel, would you like to give us your perspective on and what you think about specific to the Arctic?
I think I can add some in there. Or
Yeah,
David,
Daniel, you're breaking up a little bit, so I don't know if you can.
can you hear me well? No?
I think so, yes.
Okay, I think the ocean and the Arctic share a lot of critical minerals that are sold as the solutions, like for clean energy transition, for example. Like nickel and cobalt are both found in the ocean and also like in the seabed areas around the Arctic, because they're usually like mentioned, like they're critical for lithium ion batteries, for example. And also the ocean is seen as a place that for deep sea mining, for example, it's a place that we're going to get the rare earth elements. So instead of being seen as biodiversity hotspots, as places that provide a lot of services already to us humans, there's places that are being seen as the areas that are going to be sold for all the needs for humans in a way. Copper, for example, it's very vast in hydrothermal vents along the mid-ocean ridges, which could extend also all the way to Arctic waters, for example, also. And platinum group metals, which are usually used in hydrogen fuel cells, are in certain oceanic and Arctic deposits also. And then lastly, we have the zinc and manganese, which are important in various types of corrosion-resistant coatings, are also minerals that are represented both in marine modules and certain Arctic mining zones. So I think we have a lot of comparisons on the Arctic and the ocean, which is the place that I see the most, that are just being seen as areas as that have no life, but just being seen as service providers, that are economical service providers, just to be sold in a way. So I think it's places that we not only have to see for the mineral types that they provide, but also for the services, for the free services that the ocean and the Arctic have been provided for many thousands of years and millions of years, and will continue to provide to us humans if we just let them be. So I think it's very interesting to see those two similar comparisons.
Great. Thanks, Daniel. David, do you want to go next?
Yes, so my point, I think, is somehow similar to Bianca. So I think what we will see is depends from the standards we use. And I have some clear images about mining working in industry, but what we will see in some greenfield, because mostly we're talking about greenfields, is what we will decide to develop, and that is based on the standards that we will use. Bianca mentioned UN EC reporting codes. There are other standards in industry. Whatever is the standard we decide to use, and as geologists, we are at the very beginning of this long. I don't know to call supply chain or the very early in the process. What we will decide to use and how we will approach at the very beginning, that will condition deeply what we will see in 10 to 15 years, which is the time to develop a project. So I would focus at this stage really in choosing the right standards and the right tools to address the projects since the very beginning. And this is something where geologist has a clear role, because we will be engaged since this very early phase of exploration and the early part of decision making.
Great, thanks. I guess I'll share a couple of different perspectives. One from the 35 years of being an ecologist, doing habitat restoration, sometimes restoring lands from particularly coal mining. But then I also want to talk about it from the geologist perspective. So first, with respect to ecology, I think, having grown up at a time that was, as a child, I was before some of the mining laws really came into effect in the United States. And so that's my perspective. While I represent a European organization, I am an American. And we continue to try to clean up the waste from mining efforts that occurred well before there were any environmental laws in place, right? But even still, after the environmental laws and, requiring companies to, have a plan in place and to actually, have the bonds necessary and to get the mitigation done afterwards, there are still plenty of examples of accidents, right? And I think Europe has seen the same. So I will say that, one of my concerns, not sure what happened there. And since this is the COP of finance, I want to talk about the F word, finance, and the fact that I think most companies still do not put nearly enough funding into a bond in order to pay for the mitigation afterwards. I mean, it is astronomically expensive to get that done. And somehow we have to figure out, how to make that happen, how to, ensure that everyone is prepared for that, especially when we get into, some of these really challenging environments, right? And I think about the Arctic, I think about the deep sea floor, incredibly challenging environments to even understand. We don't even fully understand the ecology and the potential effect of our actions, right? So I think there's that aspect of it. I think, certainly in my lifetime, we've come a very long way with respect to technology. And I think that technology, whether it be robotics or, or even, AI is going to play a role. AI is going to play a role in everything, right? But I think it's going to make places more accessible. And in many of the conversations that I have in the ecological world, those conversations really surround sort of the whole concept of NIMBY, not in my backyard. And when I think about the Arctic, I think, wow, how not in anyone's backyard, right? And so I do get concerned that maybe the world that relies on these minerals for their livelihood, in some cases for their survival, might rely too heavily on finding solutions in places that don't necessarily affect them. And if you're not being affected, then you may not be as willing to be conservative, right? You might be replacing your cell phone every year, and not even realizing the amount of minerals that it takes to create that cell phone and to make that cell phone work. And that's going to be another huge part of this is there has to be a reduction in use in order to make sure that we have, because it is not it is, the minerals on the planet are finite. And they're made even more finite by our inability to access them. So then when I think about geologists, I think about the fact that if you look at the trend in individuals interested in going into geologic fields, it is a downward trend. And we need it to be an upward trend, and we need it to be a very steep upward trend, because if you think about what geosciences encompasses, there's probably not a topic in this entire COP being discussed that doesn't involve geology in one way or another. And we just are not recruiting geologists. And when I ask young people, well, why wouldn't you consider geology? Because these can be some really lucrative fields to get into. I hear things like they destroy the planet, right? So geologists do not destroy the planet, but geologists are highly educated scientists, that are finding solutions to what human beings want, whether that be fossil fuels or it be critical minerals, or it be wanting a geoheritage park, right? Or if anyone has ever been to the United States or seen Yellowstone National Park, Yosemite National Park, those are really famous ones for their geological features, right? So I'm very concerned that we work towards getting, really good messaging out. If I'm touching something or what's going on, this keeps going out. But we need to help young people who are trying to decide what kind of careers they want, to understand that if they really do want to be part of the solution, and I think that this generation coming in, we're now looking at alpha, right? Or even beyond Gen Z and into Gen Alpha, my children's generation, getting them interested in the field of geology in one fashion or another, because it touches absolutely everything.
I'd like to add something to that, especially because you said in one way or the other. And I'm in the geoscience industry, but I've never studied even a science. Well, political science. I've studied social sciences. My professor would kill me if he heard that sentence that I just said. I've studied social sciences, and I think I still feel very much at home in the minerals industry because it's such an interdisciplinary field. If there's one thing that I was able to observe at a very early stage in my career, was that geoscientists or scientists in general speak a different language than politicians do. However, to get to the results that we need for a just energy transition, for tripling renewable energy, we need a collaboration between all of them. And that was one of the reasons I wanted to get into that industry, because I thought maybe I could help building a bridge between scientists and politicians, but also academia. That's like the third part that wasn't on the page at the beginning. And having academia, governance, and industry in one room not only in one room, but also create a language in which they can communicate best, I think will be the key to tripling renewable energy in a just way and also in an efficient way. And I do want to emphasize again, social sciences are important because you mentioned demand side measures, or you mentioned that we need to reduce demand. That is something that the social scientists and economic scientists, they focus on it. And I also do agree that demand side measures need to be implemented, at least in some parts of the world. You also talked about how NIMBY plays a big role and how the Arctic seems to be in no one's backyard. First thing that came to my mind is that that's what a lot of people think, but it is someone's backyard. Yeah. And the same thing happens in different parts of the world, where many resource-rich countries, where the richness is being shifted to the global north. The resource richness is being shifted to the global north, and then the global south countries like DRC profit very little from it. And this is again the controversy in with the NIMBY discussions, because it kind of makes me angry when I think about it, because yeah, not in your backyard, but it is someone else's backyard, and the further it is away, the less tangible it is for people. And I hope that the upcoming generations will keep that in mind in industry practices and in policies. And I think when I look at my peers, it is something that a lot of people have in the back of their mind. Just want to add that.
Daniel, David, do you have anything else that you want to say on the topic? You don't have to. Just let me know if you do. I'm like craning to see, so you can just talk if you need.
I do. So if Daniel, you don't, I can start. Okay. So I have 2 points to add. One, maybe starting from a mid-career perspective. So something I think is very important also is I would call knowledge transfer. And clearly I have a bias from Europe, but it may be the same also in other regions. So we should consider part of the know-how necessary in industry and not only is not that obvious, because in some regions, Europe is one, for several years, mineral industry has been somehow going down. And we lost also part of our know-how. So it is very important thinking not only about so education, early career education, but also think to empower the generation already in the working in industry to be able to address topics related to critical minerals. So I think there is a strong need of know-how transfer and also mapping the know-how. So the same we map the resources and the deposits, we should map the know-how. And the second point is a consideration about standards. Standards are not regulations, so often are self-regulation. And this is very important because somehow empower the people that are using and decide to use these standards. I will talk about geologists because that is what I know, or the geologists that are applying a standard and evaluating a deposit or in whatever phase of exploration or later stage of a mine, has a great power in the moment that they are doing the assessment, because based on that assessment, a lot of things will be built or not built, and using and applying effectively standards that consider the AGS aspects and respect everyone has an incredible impact of everything is coming after. So also make sure professionals use the standards and understand the standards and are educated to use the standards. This has a really big impact on industry and on how we will do mining in the future. And I'm not sure this is fully perceived by all the stakeholders, but being not only a geologist but also a representative of an organization, I would like really to make sure the impact on the application of these standards by professionals is understood by all the potential stakeholders.
I just want
That's
to make a quick extra comment or extra emphasis with respect to standards, David, because I think governments need to understand the important role that standards play, right? Because what you said is absolutely correct. It's sort of a self-policing, right? So the profession sets standards for themselves. It's not a regulation. The government does. There isn't a government that manipulates or otherwise uses those standards. It is the profession itself. So in the United States, we have something, it's called the Good Housekeeping Seal. It's been around for generations, and that's, so we like to talk about, if you have a standard, you have the Good Housekeeping Seal of approval, right? It means something to even people who are not in the particular product industry, right? And so, when you have a geologist in this case that is, identified as a competent person by an organization such as the European Federation of Geologists or the American Institute of Professional Geologists, there's one in Australia, South America, or South Africa, etc., then you know that you're getting somebody who is working ethically, right? And I think at every step in the process, there need to be those kinds of standards, right? You need to, not just the regulatory piece, but that the industry needs to hold itself up to the highest standards. And I think that is a really important way, to make sure that we improve the sector moving forward, because mining does not have a good reputation, right? There are no generations on the planet right now, I think, that would say in general that mining has an overall good reputation with people who aren't in mining. But mining it's a really critical tool to, having the lifestyles that many of us have become accustomed to in the first world, for sure. And, without mining, there would have been no industrialization. And so it is important. It is going to be a continued and important part of our future, and we need to make sure that we do it in a balanced and responsible way. So with that, did you want to say one more thing? Okay.
You elaborated on his point, on David's points on standards. Yes. David, you made a really good first point, which was on knowledge transfer. If I may, I'd like to elaborate a little bit on that too, because the session is called Intergenerational Collaboration, and knowledge transfer is very closely related to that. And I would like to ask the people in the room here, what hurdles, what challenges have you ever encountered in the field of knowledge transfer in your respective fields or in intergenerational collaboration? Does anybody have any, something that was a challenge for you, or maybe also something that was a driver, something that really helped you in the knowledge exchange with different organizations? That you'd like to share, yeah? If no, that's also okay. I got one that I can talk about. Yeah, great, Raven, thank you.
Yeah, like for me, it's always been sitting equally in a space together and having that like over food and over like conversation and like very casual space and over dinner as well. And then just having that like knowledge sharing experience, especially when I'm from Australia, and a lot of the knowledge with our First Nations Indigenous community is through verbal and sitting around the fire as well, and then having that like just being that gaining that trust and that respect and having that like very meaningful giving and receiving kind of knowledge sharing experience.
Thanks, Raven. Does anybody else want to add something? Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Hi, name is Angelo. I work on energy storage, so I specialize on lithium-ion batteries. And one challenge around knowledge transfer is competitiveness in the industry. So even if we're talking about sharing knowledge and know-how and all of that stuff, information that gets passed from one company to another could make or break a business model oftentimes. So I work as a consultant, and therefore, I tend to charge for. I don't. The company I work for, wants to charge for that sort of information. But a bit of good practice that I've come up is that oftentimes the people that need information that is basic in the sector have a lot more to gain for something that for us is like common sense or common knowledge. And oftentimes that creates enough of an avalanche of information and curiosity and all of these things to get projects off the ground. So one thing that has worked is, in good faith, sharing some knowledge and experience that could also then lead to, professional collaboration and eventually a deal of sorts at a company level as well. So that seemed to have worked well for me.
I'm going to add really quick. We're going to get the conversation going now. So I want to pop back to finance and with what you say, it's very true, right? So a lot of companies, and it's not just mining, it's any corporation, what they create, not necessarily what they produce, but what they create is proprietary, right? That's not shared information. So where do you get the, new knowledge coming forth that's non-proprietary? The university system around the world, it doesn't matter what country you're in, right? A lot of people who are doing research projects, even if they, are building a new tool, it's in a non-proprietary fashion. And the whole idea of it is to share that knowledge. So from my perspective, one of the things we need to do is we need to get more money into those institutions. Again, turning it back to geology, because that's who's paying me to be here, is that geology programs are on the decline. Universities are closing those programs. They're shutting down those majors because they don't have enough students and they don't have enough resources to even pull students in, right? And so I think that is a mechanism at which we can ensure that we are sharing that knowledge, right? But I think there are multiple ways in which we share knowledge. I'm thinking of it, from generation to generation as I'm staring retirement in the face, right? And I'm trying to think about, what am I going to leave the next generation? What is the institutional knowledge that I have gained over a 35-year career? And how do I transfer that to the people who will be coming in behind me, right? And so that's, whether it's over dinner or it's okay, here's the paper files, because that's how we've done it in my generation. Now you can figure out how to get it all to electronic files. But we have to, it's also about, building a relationship and figuring out how to communicate with each other. And as a person who is, late career, Gen X, on the cusp of being a boomer, I want to talk to people in person, right? I don't want to send everybody an email. I don't want to just send something and say, here's where all the files are at, right? I really want to have that conversation and provide an opportunity for people to pick my brain. And so I get concerned that as we're what, 2 years plus out of the pandemic. And we have, I don't know about other parts of the world, but in the US, we have a lot of employees who just do not want to come back into an office environment, right? They really like working from home. They like not having to commute. And so, we really don't have that face-to-face contact like we used to. And, maybe others don't worry about that, but that's certainly something that concerns me with respect to the fact that I'm the one who now is going to have to impart the knowledge on my way out the door.
I'm really happy to see how the conversation goes because it really confirms something that we found out in a little study that we did this year. We did so with we, I mean, the group, the Resource Management Young Members Group, conducted a little not representative study at a conference on a multi-perspective study that really looked at what challenges and drivers youth, but also seniors feel or perceive in the geoscience industry. And the things that were just said, they're all one of the factors that were mentioned most. Raven, you talked about the hierarchy ladder and the network, and that was by far the aspect that was mentioned most. The fact that a lot of youth operates in silos, they have platforms and spaces in silos that work very well. However, they often they often operate in parallel to the actual decision-making platforms. And what we found out is that when you mix these people together in platforms where youth, mid-career, senior career, late career, it's late career, right? Yeah. Late career, early career are all together, this knowledge transfer is enhanced so much. And I can also speak from personal experience that the moment I stepped a foot into the expert group on resource management, which up until then was a group of late career geoscientists, my learning curve went like this. And I was lucky enough to meet a couple of other young people who were feeling the same way, but we were struggling to really find a way into this world. And luckily we found the right people and then created a group in which we were able to provide networking opportunities, learning opportunities, actually working opportunities with people in different stages of their career in different fields. So that is a thing that I would really, really support in the future to enhance that knowledge transfer. And then when it comes to what Angelo said about this competitiveness, this is also one of the things that was mentioned most. The lack of supportive social environments can be very, very damaging to the psychology and to the mind of people who want to make a change. And you probably all know what it feels like when people put bricks into your way. And hopefully you also know what it feels like when there's a mentor or someone who really takes you by the hand and provides this safe space and this opportunity and this supportive social environment. I mean, Maureen, I got to say from personal experience, collaborating with you, for example, has been an experience like that for me. And I know from other people that their learning curves also went like this when they had people whom they could collaborate with in a very supportive way. So yeah, I'm glad that you had the same experiences that we kind of found out in our study, and from personal experiences also, I can totally confirm.
David or Daniel, do either of you have something you want to add to this line of discussion?
Yes. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Perfect. I think in the transfer of knowledge specifically, I think there are many things that we have to do. Rather than just transferring data and information, it's also transferring ideological and philosophical changes and shifts that we have between generations. I think one of the things that we as millennials and also Gen Z and also now Alpha have, one thing in common is that we understand that we're not a divine species anymore. We're not a species that's superior to other beings, but we're actually one more species in the planet. And I think as a marine biologist, I mean, we have had so many new ecological concepts that just happened in the past decades or so. For example, the concept of carbon footprint, the concept of connectivity, the concept of planetary limits and planetary boundaries and resilience. Those are all relatively new ecological concepts that many people are not aware about. And just like that, I mean, are the generations before us, most of them believed that we were also like the center of the planet. So for me, for example, one of the things that's very difficult to understand, it's also changing those ideological beliefs from generation. I mean, the amount of anthropocentrism that I see, even in the ecological world nowadays, that they're putting humans as we are the most important thing in the planet. I think it's crazy, and just the amount of also ecological denialism that exists in the planet. It's crazy. Just like we have climate change deniers, we have people that are denying some ecological concepts. For example, that we are an overpopulated species. That's a concept that even environmental people don't like talking about. I mean, we're 8 billion people now on the planet, and 200 years ago, we were only 1 billion people. And 10,000 years ago, we were only 1 million people on the planet. And many people are just complaining about the consumption rate. Many people are just complaining about the industrialization, but they don't understand that the industrialization, and just like you mentioned, mining without industrialization would not have happened. The mining and the industrialization have been the basic needs for human quality. And specifically, if we really want to approach equality, if we want to approach quality of life for all 8 billion people, we're going to need the industrialization and we're going to need the mining. So we really need to also approach how we're going to go with our population growth in the future. Many environmental groups, for example, they're like, let's not talk about population because now that we're in the line of so much of the social justice, that we're denying the need to also approach women empowerment, that it's needed to reduce our population growth in the future. If we were able to empower women, if we were able to talk about family planning, if we're able to talk about the planetary limits that we have as humans in the planet, we will be able to solve issues in the future generation because they're all connected. So I really do. I mean, right now I just came from the COP of Biodiversity, the COP of Biodiversity at CBD, where I was part of the Peruvian delegation. And one of the things that was very shocking was first the lack of having discussions on biodiversity at the COP of Biodiversity. It all become human-centered. We didn't have, most of the delegations didn't have primatologists, they didn't have entomologists, they didn't have mastocytologists, they didn't have they didn't have the discussions about extinctions, about the species that were in danger of extinction. So it became another human-centered COP, where we just talked about humans, which is necessary, absolutely. It's part of the mechanisms in the Cunning Montreal, for example, framework. Humans are part of the Target 22nd and Target 23, where we have to be involved communities and we have to listen to all the voices. But also the other 21 targets, it's about biodiversity. So I remember one of the last things when we were at the last meetings at the COP 16, it's like one lady said, "Oh, this is so beautiful. This COP became about a COP of the people." And I said, it's sad because this was a COP of biodiversity. So we're also always talking about how we're silencing human groups. But what we have ended up doing is we have gone to another level where we're actually silencing is biodiversity. Biodiversity is a group that does not have a voice in most of these meetings now. As I saw also last year at COP, we're now talking so much more about adaptation and forgetting about mitigation, which mitigation is the just mechanism for biodiversity. Mitigation is the biggest justice for biodiversity. But and also the biggest justice for all human groups is stopping climate change and stopping biodiversity loss, even for the most vulnerable groups that there is. So I think that one of the things also as my generation is to understand the ecological concepts and not deny them, because I even see environmental groups denying ecological concepts and romanticizing our species. When we're one more species in the planet, we're relatively new in most of the continents. I am from the global south also. I am from Peru. And from Peru, it's crazy how now the agenda that's being put from the global north is they're coming here and they're telling us that we need to romanticize our species. They're telling us you guys are victims because of just of the global north consumption and everything. But now they're trying to deny the ecological concepts that communities from my region have understood for a long time. And that it involves also that in the global south, in countries like Peru, for example, humans have only been here for the past 16,000 years. Have only been here in 16,000 years, while biodiversity here in my region has existed for more than 3 million years. And it was the indigenous communities that took the megafauna to extinction. The megafauna disappeared in my region way before the colonial Europeans arrived. The glyptodon, the mastodon, the big mammals in my region disappeared way before 2,000 years before the Europeans arrived. So it's not only a group discussion battle, but it's also a battle to understand that our species is a species that generates extinction because we're an overpopulated invasive species. And the reason I'm a marine biologist and the opportunity that we have in marine biology is that in the marine ecosystem is a place that has been a barrier for most human groups. That's why there's also so much megafauna in the marine ecosystem. That's why you can also find the big whales. You can still find the big marine mammals. You can still find the big groups of large animals because it was a barrier for most humans. And now with human expansion and technology, we're reaching more and more, and we're each time affecting more of the marine environment. So we're going to make the same mistakes we made in the terrestrial ecosystem, in the marine ecosystem. So that's why it's and the same with the Arctic ecosystems. There are ecosystems that have been saved from the human groups for most of the time because of the harsh conditions and extreme conditions. So what we have to do now is understand that our species has a role and try to regulate and limit our species most as possible so we can prevent the damage in marine ecosystems and Arctic ecosystems, which have been the ecosystems where humans group have not affected at most yet.
Great, thanks, Daniel. We just have a few minutes left. I have a closing question for the panel, but I want to see if anyone from the audience have any questions or follow-up comments, since we said we wanted this to be a group discussion. I want to give you all a chance to do that. Okay, so here is my follow-up question to everyone on the panel. And we have about 5 minutes left. So about a minute per person. So the heads of state are all here today. And so Daniel and David, what you are missing is everybody trying to squeeze through the narrow hallways because it is so crowded, and then the big delegations coming through as they move from point to point. But keeping that in mind, and all the heads of state being here, and specific to your thoughts on the Arctic, right? What one piece of advice, what one piece of wisdom would you want to pass on to the heads of state here at the event? Because we know they're going to listen to this as soon as they're done doing what they're doing. But they actually may, who work for them may able to give them that information. David, do you want to go first?
Yes, thank you. So my piece of advice, also, let's say summarizing some of the things I heard this morning, is really create working groups, interdisciplinary, intergenerational, and I would add also intercontinental. So really include in a working group every possible different perspective, and this can really probably improve the assessment or whatever project or activity that is under consideration.
Daniel,
I try to stay in 1 minute.
Oh, you have plenty more time if you need something else. That was like 30 seconds.
Okay. So the second, I think, is engage professionals. I'm talking about geologists, but not only, and people that using standards. I think standards has an incredible impact on projects. So if you really apply, decide to use a standard, and we know this is happening in Europe, but could be even more effective. These are really very high impact on projects and activities. So engage professional and professional that are using a standard. These can make the difference in a project. Also in the economic success of the project.
Great, thank you. Bianca, you want to go next?
Okay.
I also.
Oh.
Sorry, Daniel. Do you want to go first?
Oh no, it's good. You can go first.
Good. I'll keep it short so you can use the rest of the time. I think my advice would be probably, if I keep it short, it would be arrogant because I would say do better. But what I mean with that specifically is that I think we should put, or they should put, collective and individual well-being into the focus of policies. Because I don't feel that happening right now. There are a lot of things that are used as metrics on as a goal, what we want for societies. But I think if we put human well-being in the center of it, it would create a process, and it would create processes in industries and policies that lead to what we all want. And I don't see that happening right now. And if they have that in the back of their minds with every policy that they do, I would hope that they would do better.
All right, Daniel?
I think I would tell them don't forget about mitigation. Again, most of the countries from the global south are forgetting about mitigation. And they're like, we haven't polluted the most, which is a narrative that has been the past COPs. But let's not forget that we're still rising emissions in the global south. And let's not forget also about sequestration. That's a discussion and a topic. And just like deep sea mining has been a new discussion, let's also have in mind MCDR, which is marine carbon dioxide removal sequestration. The IPCC talks about the need for sequestration. The water is the most efficient on that, but we need to take care about ocean ecosystems. So when you hear about sequestration, I would tell them, don't forget about the science, don't forget about the biodiversity impacts that can be there when there's talk about sequestration. So let's not forget about mitigation again. That's the biggest fair mechanism for all communities, is to reduce CO2 emissions and to prevent the climate change crisis. And that's the biggest fairness mechanism. And that means taking radical decisions that might be unfair for some of our countries, which means reducing emissions now because we're in a logic of rising emissions still. Because in Peru, for example, we can still rise emissions because of the fair mechanism. And that's not fair. No country should be rising emissions at all. And second of all, like I mentioned, let's not forget that when there's a sequestration discussion, let's think about biodiversity and let's think about ecosystem impacts.
Great, thanks, Daniel. I will just take a quick 10 seconds to give my bit. And what I would say is don't be afraid of new voices. I think often governments will go to the same voices that they've heard repetitively. They'd like to work with relationships that they already have, but it's time. We really have to have new voices in the room and seek out those who are going to challenge you, who are going to ask you hard questions, who are going to have high expectations of you to do better. Those are the people that you want on your team and that you want solving the problems. Thanks everyone for listening today. We really appreciate it, and enjoy the rest of COP.